In a world overflowing with distractions, we seek meaning. How do we transform ambition into something deeper, into true fulfillment? I'm Sam Pepin, CEO of Course Educa, and I've spent years helping businesses succeed by connecting their goals to something bigger. On the Meaningful podcast, we explore not just how to win in business, but how to grow as individuals. Through conversation with thought leaders, innovators, and everyday heroes, we uncover the stories that drive us towards something greater. Whether you're striving for success, seeking purpose, or just looking for the next steps in your journey, this podcast is your guide to navigating the intersection of ambition, growth, and meaning. So please join me and our incredible guests as we redefine what's possible in both business and life. Enjoy. The key to success is resilience. It's not about avoiding challenges, but learning to rise every time you fall. Welcome to the Meaningful Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Pepin, and today we're diving into three transformative themes: resilience in leadership, the power of lifelong learning, and cybersecurity's role in a changing world. Our guest today is Melissa Aarskaug, a global executive and cybersecurity leader shaping the future of risk management and business growth. With nearly 2 decades of experience, Melissa has broken barriers in male-dominated industries, led Fortune 500 companies to greater security, and championed leadership that integrated strategy, mentorship, and innovation. From overcoming adversity to mastering personal and professional balance, our journey is packed with insights that will inspire you to lead with purpose. If you enjoyed this discussion, please let the world know with a like, a small review, or even a quick share. Your support helps more people find meaningful content just like this. Let's begin. Miss Melissa Aarskaug, welcome on the Meaningful Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here today with you, Sam.
It's lovely to have you. It's my first time talking with you, and I'm very eager to dive into some of the most interesting topics you've been dealing with over the couple of years. And to kick us off, I'd love if you can tell us more about Gaming Laboratories International.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. Gaming Laboratories International, GLI, is an independent test lab that tests electronic gaming equipment around the world. My focus has been on cybersecurity for the last 11 years at the company. I work mostly now on the cybersecurity side of GLI called Bulletproof, where we solve some of the most complicated and complex problems in the casino gaming industry and other regulated industries while keeping companies safe and secure.
Yeah, beautiful. I love that. And truly, obviously, you have over 17 years of experience, obviously leading teams and fostering growth in tech. And I really want to dive deeper into kind of like the beginning of that journey. If you can take us back to that times when you're thinking about your leadership journey as a whole and how obviously it inspires and mentors others as well. Tell me more about the younger Melissa just trying to enter that field.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to share. I studied civil and environmental engineering in college. So my first real job, I guess I would say, was in the finance industry. So I worked for a big bank. And I worked for that bank all the way through college. I had a couple of internships as a civil engineering intern. And I started the bulk of my career in finance, pivoted to engineering, and found my way into the casino gaming industry accidentally. So for the last, I would say 20 years of my career, I've been managing people, leading teams, managing big complex projects. And years ago, I was one of the engineers on one of the largest concrete bridges built in the United States at the time. And it's been a great journey sitting on both sides of the fence in leadership, working with companies and people.
Yes, interesting. And one thing that was very intriguing to me as I was going through some of your life, kind of like in professional journey, is definitely this idea of breaking barriers. Obviously, you dealt with in very, very male-dominated industries, engineering, technology, cybersecurity, and shattering glass ceiling, as I like to call them, and kind of like advocating for diversity and inclusion seems to be something that you always been very much on the forefront of. where does that drive comes in, do you think? Was it part of basically the way you were raised? Tell me more about how basically you shape the person you are within that specific quality of yours.
Yeah, it made me, as soon as you asked that question, it made me think back to my first day in school as a civil engineer. I was the only person, only female in my engineering class the first day of school. And I'm a girly girl, so I was dressed up very girly like. And I showed up to my CE 101 class, and I wasn't really well received. I think, there's a couple of people in the class that said, "Oh, are you lost? Are you looking for home ec 101?" And my personality has always been just to kind of roll with the punches. And so I didn't take immediate offense to it. And I just sat down at the front of the room, took my seat, and went after it. And I think the one thing that's been very consistent in my life is I've either been too young or too old or too blonde or too female to do a lot of things. And I've never let that stop any of my any choices I've made in my life. I know when I was a freshman in college, I was running track, and I stopped running track and played rugby, and had no idea how to play rugby. I was just fast, and I learned how to play it, and I went at it full force. And so I think the one thing that's been very consistent with my life is to take kind of the punches as they come and not take offense to them, and realize that a lot of times when people have attacked me, it's their own issues. It's not my issues. I might make them uncomfortable for different reasons. Maybe because I've never met the mold. I didn't look like a typical engineering student. I didn't look like a typical rugby player. When I got my first banking job, I was tiny and young, and everybody thought I was 12, not 17. And so I think I've just really taken things as they've come in my life, and um, not been always so reactive to, the comments that have come at me.
Yeah, and that's beautiful. That's very beautiful, and it's interesting to see, because one thing I want to ask you more on a personal level is when you're thinking about not only your own journey but sort of society's journey within basically this understanding of diversity and inclusions. Tell me more about, was this sense of being left out only felt at first, or how does that basically, how society involved within in a place where inclusion and diversity is I will go as far as saying glorify and view as a good thing. Was that can you specifically point out to a moment where I suppose a place in your career where you saw those glass being shatters for good?
I think maybe I've just always had a different lens on. I think when I think back to when I played sports really young, there weren't softball fields back when I first started playing. So I was playing baseball with the boys and football with the boys, and a lot of the girls that I grew up with and in my neighborhood, they didn't want to play sports. They were not playing outside. I have always enjoyed the outdoors, always enjoyed sports. So it was just common for me to play sports with the boys and work with the boys. And at one point, I laugh. My father had me playing sports with the boys just so I could be better than the girls. And so we joke a lot about this. I thought my father had lost his mind when he told me to go run track with the boys. But the interesting part about his parenting then was I got better because I was running with people where they were much faster, much stronger than I was. And I strive to keep pace. And so when I started running with the girls, I was one of the fastest because I was used to running with stronger runners. And I don't think it's a man or a woman thing. I think I've just always, you know, reached for people that were better than me, raced against people that were better than me. And my sphere of friends around me have always been older, and it has cut back my learning curve in a lot of areas of my life.
Right. One of my favorite author of all time is Ralph Waldo Emerson, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And he used to say something quite beautiful about this, which is go to where there is no path and leave your own trail. It to me at least, that's very much I think the mindset you've been embracing, and it's definitely been obviously quite successful within your career. So there's a great deal of novelty and I think insights that we can all take from that. And that ties me into sort of the innovation in cybersecurity, which I've been able to kind of like preview through the scope of me preparing for this podcast. And you seem to have been obviously very much instrumental in driving cybersecurity's strategy, specifically at Bulletproof and obviously JLI, and sort of helping quite big company, Fortune 500 companies in kind of like mitigating risk and enhancing operation altogether. Tell me more about the meaning you find in that work and how perhaps just how joyful it is for you to be able to embrace such a role.
Yeah, and then just one more kind of point is my journey hasn't always been smooth sailing. Like I said, my first day of school, I had a lot of people that, weren't happy that I was in the class. I was in the honors program, so I ruined the curve a lot. So there have been a lot of people, men and women for that matter, along my journey that have tried to take me off course and take me off my game, as I'll call it. And I think the one thing that I'll share is, if people aren't upset with you or irritated with you, you're in the wrong circles. I am who I am today because of all the difficult things I've been through, all the difficult people, getting cut from sporting teams, even though I was an All-American athlete, all these little things that have happened because I'm me and I'm woman, or I'm me and I have a strong personality, are all the sum total of who I am today. And there's a silver lining with cybersecurity. I think, when I started at GLI, I knew nothing about the casino gaming industry. I had no contacts in the industry. I knew nothing about compliance. So I was starting out at a net negative. But what I did have that, was a want to learn and a want to understand. And so I put on my Curious George hat and I went out and I started talking to our customers. And when I started, I got the most difficult, hardest to deal with territories, clients, and customers. And I think that was a great catalyst for me to learn quicker. And I had opportunities along the way to open different spaces for the company. I was able to open several jurisdictions we had terrible relationships in, and really help the company solve really tough problems along the way without, I don't want to say ego, but ego in the way. Just, people were upset at me. They were upset at the company, and just going in with two ears and one mouth and learning how to solve the problem my way, not the past way that was done.
Right. Interesting. In dealing with those, I always like what Jim Rohn had to say on this, but truly I'm a big believer that obviously this resilience, first of all, not only being one of the greatest qualities, but truly only shaped by either failures or difficulties basically during your paths. Would it be fair to say that that made you not only a better professional but a better person altogether?
Absolutely. I would say I look for challenges. I look to create innovation. I do things differently. The way I do things are much different than others. How I get from A to B is very different. And I think the one thing that my younger self would say is I didn't always communicate that to others, right? I was solving problems different than other people were solving problems, and how I got to the answers were different and maybe even sometimes faster than others, which upset others at times. And I think my younger self, if I could tell her anything, is to communicate more about how I got to where I got to younger. And I think that would have just took people off their guard, I guess. But then again, I wouldn't be where I am today had I not, paid some dumb tax along the way.
Right. Right. And obviously working with some of the most prolific companies in the world is quite the feat. We were able to do such thing also through our agency. But for you specifically, have you found there's obviously differences, and I suppose not only in the bureaucracy but more in the tangible work that is needs to be done when you're working with a Fortune 500 compared to, let's say, more of a SMEs type of framework?
That's a great question. I think you need to be on your game. If you're dealing with bigger companies, higher level executive, their patience for is very different. And I think if you don't come and show up to a meeting organized with your thoughts, you're going to lose the trust and respect of those companies. So when I showed up to meetings, I was on my A game. I knew what I was going to do. I was helping them solve problems. And I was looking at the meeting as an opportunity for me to give first to the client, and instead of showing up, I've never showed up to take orders, if you will. I showed up to better understand the client so I could solve their problems. And a lot of times the problems I've solved in the casino gaming industry weren't something that the company I work for solves for. I've helped different companies, different organizations do things that had nothing to do with my regular day-to-day job. And I think when you have that pay it forward mentality, pay it forward attitude, it comes back in spades. And I think in the world we live in today, everything's so transactional. I don't think a day goes by for me, Sam, that somebody has not reached out to me on LinkedIn asking for something. Instead of getting to know me or understanding what they're asking, they just kind of show up and ask for something. And so I think when you lead your relationships in the way to give versus always get from the relationship, you'll get more out of relationships from people.
Yeah, and there's so much that's such incredible insight. Thank you for sharing, Melissa, because I think we live in a world now, and especially Western world. I don't want to talk for basically the rest of basically, I suppose, other countries and their ways of doing. But even, we live in such a performance based basically understanding that sometimes we lose this very very key portion of life, which is the human portion of it. This understanding that anytime you're selling to somebody or you're basically mentoring someone, anytime basically you're doing that to another human beings, obviously with feelings and different ways of viewing the world and themselves. Was that always something that you were aware of basically that humanity that needs to be preserved, even though you were working with let's be very honest, in some space where there's a lot of technology and even gaming, for example, where we might see some disconnection between the computers and the people running them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're distracted. Right, a lot of times if we're in a meeting and our phones binging, we it's a reflex, right? We pick the phone up. It's whether it's a social media pop-up, a phone call, a text message, or any of the other hundreds of notifications we get on our devices. I think when you show up solely focused on what you're trying to do in a meeting, I think you're going to be able to focus really well versus having 10 things on your mind and being distracted, because whoever you're sitting in front of is going to notice that. And people make and have judgment on the transaction of the dialogue in, what do they say, under 10 seconds. They can make an opinion about you and what you're doing in under 10 seconds. So if you show up to any of your meetings and you're on your phone and you're irritated, you're not going to make the best first impression. So I think really getting yourself grounded and organized and what you're trying to get from the meeting helps you best prepare. And I know I've been guilty myself of showing up to meetings and things unprepared, and I've learned the lesson a few times in my life, and therefore I don't make those mistakes anymore. But I think in a world that is so online, so distracted, um, if you're always distracted, you're never going to achieve the things you want in your life, no matter what those goals are personally and professionally. If you're constantly being distracted by people or your phone or things, you're never going to hit the goals you set out for. And I know we're early part of the year, and I find that by the end of February, most people's fitness goals are gone. And I don't necessarily think it's that they're not motivated, they don't want health. It's that they haven't made the space and given themselves some grace on that. We're all a work in progress trying to achieve our goals, but if we're distracted and we have too many things going on, it makes it easy to not get to the gym, not to eat an apple, not to take care of ourselves. And so it's really staying focused on where your goals are. And I think one of the ways I do that, Sam, is every morning before I open when I open my eyes in the morning, I put together a plan even before I touch my phone in my mind. And then I move through my morning, and then I'm writing that plan before I go into my morning routine. And so I'm leading myself through my day versus having the day lead me. And I have family members that are retired, and they're the busiest people I know, and they don't have anywhere to be and nothing to do. And we all get really busy in our day to day, that if we're not leading ourselves, we're not going to get to where we need to be.
Right. I focus who it was, but obviously a goal without a plan and focus is simply an illusion. And when you're thinking about it's interesting the last point you made, sort of just how big of a role visualization for you plays inside the start of your day, right? Just waking up and making a plan that basically within your mind, within the intangible, as I like to call them. What tell me more about basically how you do so, and how maybe other leaders can take insights of the power of visualization.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. Last night, I'm a 7 to 8 hour a night sleeper, and last night I had 5 hours. So it was easy for me to say, I'm tired, I'm not ready to start my day, I'm not feeling great, I don't want to exercise, and I just get up and do it. And I don't give myself the opportunity to make excuses. It's part of my regular routine, where it's really a mental mind game as well, and getting yourself. Our brain is a very powerful tool. It can make or break you, and I think it's really up to you on how you lead yourself through your life. And so this morning when I woke up, I had slept less than I usually sleep. I have a young son, and he tends to want to jump in bed with me regularly. So he changes my sleep dynamics quite a bit. But instead of having that, oh, I can't do it, I'm just going to sleep in bed, I'm going to try to catch up, I hit the ground running with my day. And I make a plan that maybe instead of going at my exercise routine with an A, maybe it's a B today, but I'm still doing and going through the motions, because it becomes robotic, right? Once we get used to going to bed at this time, waking up at this time, exercise, it becomes such a habit that your body will just automatically do it for you. And I think it's like that with everything, right? Whether it's your career or any of your personal goals, once you get into a rhythm, it's easy to accomplish your goals once you get into the right headspace and really prepare your mind for it. When I'm doing tough things, or about 4 weeks ago, I did a 24-hour work trip flip. So I left at 3 a.m. Texas time on a Friday, and I arrived back home Saturday morning at 3 a.m. So I was gone from my home for that entire time. Now, I could have said, okay, I'm going to be tired, I'm not going to attend to my family, I'm not going to attend to myself. But really, what I did on my way home from the airport was prepare a plan in my mind on how I was going to attack the day. So I'm taking care of me, my family, and what needs to get accomplished on my Saturday.
Right. One thing you definitely champions, and I'd love to dive deeper into, is consistency. I see you very, very often, obviously talking about disciplines and just how important consistency are in achieving long-term goals. And it seems like when you're thinking about this world where, again, our focus is very scarce, where we're all obviously very, very distracted, not only by technology but our own mind, kind of like creating this fictitious, basically, not only plans but outcomes for diverse things we're focusing on. How were you able personally to go in a place where you can cultivate this kind of like, I suppose, robotic framework and mindsets where your body and mind are leading you to basically what they ought to do just because of how consistent you are to doing such things? Do you have some insight and tips on how professionals can be more consistent?
Yeah, and I tap into my intuition a lot, and I tap into my body, my mind, my space. And if I'm trying to make decisions about something, should I do this? Should I do that? I really sit and thought and think about it, and I'll know the answer shortly. But I am sitting in thought and quiet without distraction. I don't have, my four children around. I don't have, my work going, or I don't have social media. I'm very focused on what I'm trying to accomplish. And how I think of it is like, let's just say a conductor of an orchestra. Inside an orchestra, there's a lot of different instruments that are playing, and the conductor has to hear all of those instruments and how they all interact with each other. And so how I look at my life is I'm the conductor of it. And my marriage is a part of that, my children, my job, my personal hobbies, my health, my family, extended family, my network, my community. All of it plays in to what I would say is my life, and how I'm able to focus on it is I go between, is there such thing as balance? I go back and forth with this. Is there balance? Is it integration? And really, how I lead through my life is some days are far unbalanced with my family, and some days are far out of balance with my work. But it's being aware of those imbalances before they become, I'll just say, unhealthy, whether it's our health, our wealth, our family. So it's being mindful of the things that are going on around you, right? And I think it goes back to what I was saying before, is when I wake up in the morning, I'm doing checks and balances for all the buckets in my life. Like, what needs addressed today? If my kids have activities, I need to make sure those are all organized with my husband. If I'm traveling, I need to make sure my plane's on time. It's really what bubbles up for me is what's most important today. And how I do that is I step back and look at my life like I'm a conductor of it. And I have to some days spend more time in my marriage, and some days spend more time with my work. And really, all of it plays together because it's the sum total of me and what I'm providing to the world. And a lot of times people ask me, like, how do you do it? And how do you juggle it? It all starts with me, right? If I'm not in the right space, um, I can't help everybody else in my life, or my clients, or all the other pieces, my podcast that I'm very passionate about, the people that I mentor, the boards I sit on, the clients I serve. I can't do all of that if I'm tired, I don't feel good, and I'm worn down.
Yeah, and this conversation of balance is one that is quite trendy. We hear it quite a bit on this podcast, and I prefer to call it harmony or even integration. I think is a superior word than balance. But when you're thinking about basically work life integration, just for the sake of continuing this narrative, it seemed like obviously you have a very demanding career. It seemed like you have a wonderful marriage as well, and you're also a mother of four from what I was able to retrieve. That's obviously quite a bit. That's quite the workload, as we like to say. And I love what Andrew Wilkinson had to say on this, which is you don't have to make yourself miserable to be successful. It seemed like you definitely also endorse that doctrine. Was that always the case? Were you always the person that is able to have kind of like a big workload and managing it quite well, and perhaps find ways in which you can meaningfully navigate all these different spheres of life, perhaps?
Yeah, and it goes back to coaches and mentors and people, my counsel. I have a fantastic counsel when I'm making decisions. Before I married my husband, I talked to my counsel. Before I had my son, I was an older mother, recently having a son. I consulted my counsel before I started a podcast. All the things I've done in my life, I have people that I bounce my ideas off, and those leaders and wonderful people that are my friends and mentors. They don't necessarily solve my problems, so I don't get on the phone and they don't say, "Hey, Melissa, you need to do this." Well, it's a dialogue, right? We have a dialogue, and all of them um, give me insights or ask great questions. I think that's the one thing that my mentors have done superior than a lot of others is they don't say, okay, Melissa, step one is this, step two is this, step three is that. They ask the right questions, and then I make the decisions as we're talking through things. So I've made a lot of my own mistakes in my life, and my mentors were there to catch me and get back on that horse. I've made some mistakes in business. I've made some mistakes in all different areas of my life. And how I look at them is there's a silver lining in all of them. And we need to learn from the mistakes we make. And if we don't learn, I personally believe they continue to show up in our life until we've had enough and are forced to address it. And kind of playing with the narrative about health is a lot of times people say, okay, it's beginning of the year, I'm going to get healthy, I'm going to start on Monday. And it doesn't, a lot of times they don't get real serious until they have a doctor's note that says they have a serious health condition, and then they become serious. And so I prefer in my life not to get to those sticky places. So I set goals for myself daily, and I consult my children and my husband and my mentors and my bosses and peers, and I get feedback from those people that I respect.
Yeah, and that console is such an interesting idea, and I was myself basically being very young, more and more understanding this concept of you for different basically inquiries you might have or different struggle, you go to different people, right? For unbalanced basically checkbooks, I don't go to the same person that when my car broke down. So I think this console of trust is so important. But one thing that I hear very often is, one, how can we maintain all these relationships in a meaningful fashion? But two, how can I find these trustworthy people to basically be part and incorporate into my console? I think you'll agree with this, but there's a point where you want quite a concise console when it comes to who you truly trust. I'm sure it's not 10,000 people, but for example, are on your console. Tell us more about, I suppose, how do you harmonize this understanding of who gets in it and perhaps how to maintain those relationships optimally?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think I've had some terrible advice in my life. And I explain and how I'm a shoe lover, so I correlate it to shoes. I try the shoe on and I start down the path of the relationship. And if the person and I are not aligned, it's not that I'm rude. It's just that I don't prioritize or make time for typically the negative naysayers, drama type relationships. I tend to gravitate towards people that are doing things, um, innovative type of people, that are passionate about an array of things. Some of my best friends are stay-at-home moms. And some of my best friends are in their 60s and 70s, and they have become family to me. And some of them I've known for 20 years. And I think, one really important thing that I find is a lot of people want to give you advice on your life or what you're doing. Like in my case, whether I should, be a traveling mother is not really great for my children. And sometimes I think people have positive reasons to give you advice. It doesn't necessarily mean I have to agree with their feedback. And that is going back to being mindful and having a relationship with yourself. Let's say somebody tells you something that you don't agree with, like I'm a bad mom. Someone might say, "Oh, you're a bad mom. Could you travel?" I absolutely do not agree with that statement, nor do my family or my children. It's part of my life, and I'm a better mother because I travel for my children, because I'm more focused on the time that I do get to have with them versus just being in the same house with them. And so I think for those that are looking for mentors, um, sometimes they come randomly. One of my best mentors and best friends I met while walking through an art exhibit. Another one of my very dear friends I met on a plane, sitting next to them on a plane. So I think when you're open to having relationships and dialogue with people, the right people show up in your life. And then it's really up to you to fire the ones that are not the right people. And I've done that many, many times in my life is removing toxic relationships from my life, because I have very rigorous goals and very important things I want to do with my time here on this earth.
Right. No, you seem to be doing quite well on time management. Actually, that's it seems to be another one of your strong suits, and it reminds me of basically this kind of like comprehension of life, which I definitely live with, and I think it would resonate with you as well, which is to to handle yourself. Basically, obviously use your head, but to handle your others, excuse me, use your heart. And it's always something that I was a big advocate and loved about some of your of basically what you're talking about is this big emphasis on obviously empathy and authenticity as well, which you talk a lot about. When you're thinking about what it means to be authentic in a world where perhaps there's never be as much fake rules and falsifications of resumes and anything else that you might be able to falsify. Just how important it is to find authenticity insides out within yourself first, and let it shine basically so the world can appreciate it. Is there any basically tips you typically gave to other leaders or even people you're mentoring to find a space of mind where they're not authentic for the sake of being authentic or because others want them to be authentic, but for their own basically well-being and saneness?
Yeah, I think being authentic is, I correlate it to having confidence. People become more authentic when they're confident. And in most of my life, I was the youngest for a lot of the things I've done in my life. And so, um, I guess my confidence was built because of that, because I had to show up in a fashion that people wouldn't think I was not smart enough or sophisticated enough. But I think being authentic comes with confidence. And this saying, birds of a feather flock together. And if all of your friends are whiners, moaners, and complainers, it's quite likely that you're also a whiner, moaner, and complainer. And it's hard to show up and be authentic and when you're not confident and you're not focused. And I think a lot of times, um, it's situational, right? Um, we can't always be 100% transparent of what's going on in our life for different reasons, but being authentic to it starts with you. You have to be authentic and true to yourself and love yourself and respect yourself and take care of yourself. And when you're able to do that for yourself, you're able to do that for others. And if you don't take care of yourself, it's highly unlikely that you're going to be able to really take care of others, because you have to, the flight attendant says it best. You got to secure your mask before you can secure your child's mask. And I think you got to be authentic to you and true to you. And we're all figuring out, what we want to do with our lives. Um, when I look back on my career, if you would have told me, 13 years ago, I'd be in the casino gaming industry and cybersecurity living in Texas, I probably would have laughed at you, because I studied civil and environmental engineering, and therefore I was working in the field. And I think being open to what shows up in your life, and who shows up into your life, and really wondering why. I've had last year a woman show up in my life unexpectedly because I got on her list serve of her newsletter. And we've become friends because I've accidentally got on her newsletter. She lives on the West Coast. I live in Texas. In real life, we would have never met each other. But by some accident, I got on her newsletter. We've become very good friends. And so I think take life as it comes to you and be open to opportunities and possibilities, and don't limit yourself with any of the things like, oh, I can't because I don't know, or I'm too young, or I'm too old, or, I live in this state, I can't do that. I think the more limitations we put on ourselves and the more boundaries we put on ourselves, the more our mind, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, the more the mind will work to put those boundaries on you.
Right. It seems like you might have a gift actually for community building. You were just talking about the fact that you're meeting all these people in what seems to be random fashion, but I don't believe in coincidence, so I'm sure it's because of your vibration, basically frequencies, and in the way you endure yourself and see the world, and perhaps obviously through your work. You mentioned your podcast, obviously you mentioned your work as a mentor as well, fostering growth in your own community, and kind of like sharing your expertise also quite wisely seems to be very important. I want to highlight kind of like the impact of that community building, not only for yourself, but what it did for basically the ripples effect perhaps within that community. I always like to share this thought because I think for it to be very true. But the more good I do, the more good seems to basically find me, and it's something not only that I theoretically believe, but I practically basically see the effects of. Have you also basically found a kind of like this novelty in the given concepts, and perhaps how can you professionally, basically, even though we're very, very busy individuals, still find the time to spend some time and foster quality relationships?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I am very good at keeping and maintaining relationships. And, when you said that, I kind of chuckle internally. I am not a podcast person. I never had it on my goals that I wanted to have a podcast. It was not something that I had the time or space in my life to do. It really just became my weekend hobby. And how I ended up doing a podcast is a lot of the same questions were showing up in my life, and I was answering the same questions to people. And I happen to have a lot of fantastic friends. Most of the people on my podcast are friends of mine or friends of friends. And I decided it would be a better ripple, like you were saying, if I could share that with other people. And what I've learned along the way is so many things about the way I speak, some of the hardest introductions with my guests were actually my best friends. And so I'm getting on a podcast with a best friend struggling with words, and we get off the phone and chuckle and say, God, we've known each other for 15 years. How are you having a hard time asking me questions? And so I think what happened with things like the podcast is it became something that landed on my heart, and there was people asking about it. Um, I've sat on boards. I've sat on different boards in my industry, outside my industry, but the same thread has been consistent with my life, and it's really um, to pay it forward in my life. That is a common thread in my life. It's not just my life, it's my life to play my cards the best I can, but it's also my life to give back because of all the blessings that have happened in my life. And it's an interesting thing, and how it all comes full circle, Sam, is I got an award last year, the Pay It Forward Patty Becker Award. And when Patty Becker called me and told me, I got really emotional about that award. And it wasn't about the award for me. It was about, I don't show up looking for that. I do it because that's who I am. It's in my DNA. It's in my belief system. I believe in mentoring and coaching, and I will continue to mentor and coach as many people that show up in my life. I now host different events here in Austin locally with the simple fact of connecting people together. There's no hidden agenda with it. I'm just bringing a bunch of really smart people together with a simple goal of connecting and helping each other. It's a give-get relationship. It's non-transactional. Usually the people that show up to take don't end up staying around very long because people see it and feel it. And when you get a bunch of really smart executive business owners and leaders in a room, it's amazing what happens and what can transpire for the better of the world. And you're spot on with that because it is a ripple effect. It does cascade down to other people. I just did a panel last year on financial literacy. I am not a financial advisor. I'm not a mortgage broker. The people on the panel with me were much more seasoned than I was. But after that panel, I had about 25 people reaching out to me to talk more. And the organizer, approached me to, you know, talk more about that and educate some of the other younger women on their careers. And it wasn't something that I was searching to do. I was sought after to talk on this panel, and therefore I was able to help about 10 women find their next thing. Several of the women that were in this room had lost their job during the pandemic, were looking for a new job, or were an only house breadwinner. And just the way I approached talking to them had nothing to do with me getting. It was simply to show up and help them and share my experience with them. Um, and so I really look at life that way. Now, being busy, I can't help everybody, but what I do is I do my best to schedule it. And I am a friend to those that are on a similar path in life to help each other and pay it forward and leave the world a better place than when we found it.
Right, that's so beautiful, and truly, and that's always an interesting thought that I had. But the more I was networking, the better, basically, bigger circles I was getting into. One of the key differentiator between basically just the good people out there and the great ones is their abilities to be generous. It's the givers, and obviously Zig Ziglar been talking about this for decades now, alongside other basically very, very beautiful minds. But it's incredible, this understanding in which you can be as generous as you can, because the world will find a way to give it back to you in a meaningful fashions. And that generosity is something that I see being talked more and more about, because I think we're getting more and more in tune with the laws of the universe, the law of attraction, for example, which is quite famous, but I think still being embraced by as many people as possible, because that is the truth. That is basically holding the inside powers, the powers of basically the earths. And you were talking about just how big of a portion of your life basically is based through visualizations and what I call the intangibles and the laws of the universe and so on. one. And to me, that's something that I found in every single high performers. They always share these collective visions of helping basically others, just like they were helped by others that helped them basically when they were beginning. And I found these thoughts to be just quite beautiful. You were talking about the award you received. That was actually my the next place I was going, which is great. You beat me to it, but truly, I want to go back to it on a more of a sentimental, basically basis. You were mentioning how emotional you got when you got that call. Truly, what does it mean now in your career? Obviously, spending close to 2 decades now in a leadership position, how great does it feel to receive these type of calls and see the true impact of some of your work?
There's not a greater feeling than when you get a call that you've made a difference in somebody's life. And so I, for all of those that I've helped or people that have called and thanked me, it is an amazing feeling when you have helped people get out of their comfort zone and go after something that they didn't think they could do. And what I hope to leave people with is confidence to embrace whatever's next for them, and help them believe in themselves enough to take the next step on whatever the step is. And I think it's different for everyone. Most of the women I mentor right now are not in the same industry as I am. They're in very different industries. I mentor women that when we talk, I feel like they should be my mentor versus me being their mentor. But just like you said, it's a mindset on how I tackle and handle different things in a day. What I tackle in a week, I would say most people tackle in a month, but how I'm able to do it is I'm very grounded in who I am, what my mission is, my faith, what I want to leave behind, the legacy that I'm building, how I'm raising my children, how I'm building, the organization I work for. I started, let's see, almost 13 years ago in cybersecurity and casino gaming. And this was an afterthought for most regulated industries, and definitely the casino gaming industry. To now, I've been able to work with 90% of the clients around the globe in the casino gaming industry, if not more. And that happened through, like you were saying, a lot of community building, a lot of relationships, a lot of talking. Um, I remember, I laugh. I remember talking about cybersecurity, and so many people, told me I was nuts, and I just kept showing up and talking about cybersecurity. And then one day, you get that phone call saying, "Hey, I remember you told me, years ago, about cybersecurity." And I laugh. Years ago, I had a regulator reach out and say, "Hey, yeah, that blonde girl that works for GLI that was talking about cybersecurity 5 years ago." And so things that we say and leave with people stick, right? So I had somebody reach out to me from 5 years of something I spoke on that they remember to reach out to me. So be careful with what you say to people, because it will come back around, and how you leave people. And um, a lot of times, I'm very passionate about leaving people better than I found them. And sometimes it's tough love, right? Sometimes, I've had the whiners, moaners, complainers in my life, excuse makers, and I've had to, you know, get up in it with them and say, "Hey, we got to get this thing done. We got to put in extra work." And so I think there's another side of it is leadership isn't always easy. It's tough, having tough conversations, or having tough bosses. Sometimes your toughest bosses that you think are too tough, they're abusive, or they're bullies, or whatever the words you use, are the ones that actually have pushed you out of your comfort zone and have made you a better person. And so I challenge all those people that are saying that they've had I'll flip the narrative on the head. Abusive relationships, professionally or personally. What happened to you since you've either exited that relationship or still in it? I know some of my worst bosses were some of the ones that challenged me the most. And I would say, yes, I've been bullied. Yes, I've had terrible losses. But some of those terrible losses, I've looked at it and I've learned a lot from how I interacted with myself and my emotions, how I acted in my family. So getting off a call with somebody that's a terrible boss and then interacting with my family, I've become aware of how that cascades in your life. And so I think leadership and being a really good leader and mentor is not easy. We talk a lot about, oh, it's just talking about your goals. And, it's not always that. Sometimes it's having difficult conversations, saying you're not doing this, or you need to do better at that. And I think that's the one thing with leadership is, and for me specifically, leaving people better than they found them and helping them get wherever they need to get personally and professionally. I look at the whole human, not just the human in whatever situation. I've had some terrible peers that I've worked with in my life, side peers to me, and I've actually either helped them find jobs or helped them find other things in their life when in all actuality, I should have never taken the call. But again, going back to the go giver and paying it forward, I think there's something to be said about um, really being stronger and getting on that call and being the bigger person and helping people get where they need to get.
Right. And something that is quite always been interesting to me is the way you look at leadership, the way you talk about it is very holistic, right? You mentioned the whole human, and it's something that I see more and more people talk about, but I think that you have a philosophy on this that is definitely worth diving deeper in. How much do you think holistic leadership shape basically modern workplace culture and specifically, I suppose, individual success? Tell us more about just how big of a deal that is when it comes to true tangibles and professional workplace nowadays.
Oh, it's real important. I think, understanding people in their lives, right? I think if people have to take their kids in and they got to rush from getting their kids into school to rush to work, and you're the manager that gives them a hard time and, is aggressive with them all the time about being 5 minutes late, how motivated do you think that person's going to be at their job versus calling the person into your office and saying, hey, Susie, you're consistently late to work. Is there something that we can do better? Is there a way that we can help you? And really understanding why Susie's coming in late every day to work. And maybe it's that she needs to shift her start time from 8 to 8:15 versus starting at 8 because there's traffic and so on and so forth. And if we don't know that, and you're the kind of manager that's always riding Susie, she's not going to be working as hard as she could be, and she's not going to be all in at her job. And the job, therefore, is going to be transactional. I do this for this pay and I leave at the end of the day versus my boss is supportive. He's investing or she's investing in my growth, my leadership. Me professionally, the leaders I've seen that are the best, which I would say they're the best of all, um, are the ones that invest in growth of their employees. They understand their employees, they value their employees, and they appreciate their employees. If you're not appreciating your staff, sitting alongside your staff and understanding them as a human, they're probably not going to stay at the company for long. And if they are staying at the company, they're probably not fully engaged as much as they can be.
Right, and that's very serious. We talk about basically how big workspace culture is for not only productivity and bottom line, but just for human basically sanity, health, and enlightenment, which is obviously, as we know, so important. And I think that I saw an incredible study actually that most employees, I think it was 72% of employees, would actually take a pay cut if there was to be to go in a company that would basically actively pursue and invest in their enlightenments and their basically self improvements through diverse tools and educations. That's very major, and we definitely need to utilize that point of contact more and more. One thing that I want to conclude on, Melissa, is as that was very fascinating, is just how much of a lifelong learner and just how curious you are, perhaps, is always something I admire across basically all leaders. And obviously you hold a dual degree, but also it seems to me at least that you are always pursuing ways in not only becoming professionally better but personally better. It make me it remind me of a quote. I don't recall the author, but it was something around the lines of live as if you were going to die tomorrow, but learn as if you were going to live forever. And it seemed like it's definitely a mindset you've been able to embrace. Was that always the case? And how can you stay curious and so hungry? What's the why behind basically being so hungry to becoming better altogether?
Yeah, I think it goes back to my faith. I feel I've been, these are the cards I've been dealt. I'm going to play them and I'm going to do better for myself, my immediate family, my extended family, and the community that I'm involved in. And that's really what motivates me to speak to companies and their leaders. Last year I spoke 31 times in person, a lot of which was around leadership and sharing my insights and doing motivational speaking for companies and their employees. And I do all of that with my time. It's not something it's that I volunteer to do that. I want to leave the world a better place. And if I help 100 people do better, like you said, it cascades to the world. And I'm very motivated to do that and build communities of people that are positive, are learning from each other. And something that is a threat in my life is fun. So I am a lifelong learner. I learn something new every single day. And a lot of times I even learn it from my own children. My own children teach me things as well. And so I don't think it's an age thing or a industry thing. I think it's being open to get coached and learn from people, and then once you learn it, it's not my gift to keep. It's my gift to share. I've been a lifelong yogi, and I now teach yogi and help others in their practice. It's not something that I do professionally. It's something that I do because it's a hobby. People come up to me and I laugh, Sam, when I had my son. I was doing handstands on my head, and all the women in the class came up to me and said, "Hey, if she could do it, I could do it." And so I started making friends because of that, and it's just kind of cascaded from there. And now some of those people that I have mentored are now teachers in yoga, and now they are teaching me the other direction. And so everything really comes full circle. And the more I learn about cybersecurity, leadership, yoga, raising kids, being a woman leader, being a trailblazer, the more I want to pay it back and give it forward. And so I'm going to continue to lead with that. And this year I want to focus on doing more of that, speaking and mentoring and helping those that are looking for it.
Right. What comes around goes around. Melissa Aarskaug, it was such an incredible time to dive into some of your greatest insights, and thank you so much for being so vulnerable and sharing and with such depth. I think your personal life. I really appreciate it, and I would also really appreciate it if you could share some last words of wisdom with our audience, please.
Yeah, I think one thing that I have always also really led with in my life is not comparing myself to everyone. Everybody's journey is different. Where I'm starting in my life was different than others. And so I think really setting goals for you, not goals and comparing yourself to other people, and then give yourself grace to learn and work through your goals. Sometimes I've been able to check my goals off quickly, and some of my goals have taken me 20 years and I work at them. And others, my 20-year goal is another person's 1 week goal. And so don't put boundaries on yourself, and give yourself the grace that you're never going to be the best at anything. You're never going to know it all, and really just continue to learn and smile and shine and share with the world, because it comes back, and that's not the reason to do it, but to have a go-giver, pay it forward attitude and really have faith in yourself and all the things that you're passionate about doing.
Thank you for spending your time with us today on the Meaningful Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review or share it with someone who could benefit from it. And always remember, your story matters. Make it meaningful. We hope to see you next time.